All right, guys, we're rolling. Welcome back to the Low Carb Consultant Podcast. Today, I'm excited to welcome Linda Salant to the show, known online as the Carnitarian. Linda has been living the carnivore lifestyle since 2015, using tools like CGMs to test what really works metabolically and coaching others on how to reclaim wellness, reduce inflammation, and restore vitality through meat-based living. She merges practical day-to-day life, flavor, and sustainable meal planning, all while challenging conventional health dogma. So, Linda, it's a pleasure to finally meet you here, and thank you so much for taking the time and coming on.
Oh, the pleasure's all mine. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the invite, and I'm excited to chat.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe before we get into all the carnivore stuff here, would you mind giving the listeners who may not be familiar with you quite yet, just a real brief background on yourself and how you even got into this space?
So you mean the carnivore space? How did I get into that?
Yeah.
So, basically my story starts way back in college, and I won't even tell you what year that was, but it was a while back. My story starts, and I learned about ketosis and ketogenic diets in college. And I realized when I left college that a ketogenic diet was actually a pretty great diet for me. I had a manager at the time who was like, I'm going to try this Atkins diet thing. So I'm dating myself right now. You can figure
Atkins.
out about when this
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
So she says, why don't you do this Atkins diet thing with me? And I was like, all right, fine. We'll see. I thought I had a pretty good diet. I had always been in pretty good shape, but I had a lot of knee pain and I was having trouble. Like, this was in my 20s. I remember I was having trouble getting from like the entry level to the second floor, like where I worked. And it was just like one floor, and I would take the elevator, just silly. So when I went on an Atkins diet, I went on a ketogenic diet, I felt better, right? I felt a little bit lighter. I was able to lose a little bit of weight. Like I said, I was never really overweight, um, but I felt like better. And it was basically, a lot of spinach, a lot of steak, a lot of broccoli. And I still had this knee pain, but I felt better. Time went on. I was on and off, different diets. I tried all sorts of different things over the years because I always had this kind of fluff to my bottom half, because lipedema, which is what I now know this is, sort of shows up even like in puberty, and as we age it just gets worse. In pregnancy, it really sort of exploded. And I said, after having my kids, I said, I've got to get back on track. I'm going to go back to a ketogenic diet and see if I can get rid of this excess fat, especially in the legs. And I found myself in a zeroing in on health Facebook group,
Mm.
because I was doing keto, and that led me to this like uber keto, which was like the carnivore diet, which was the very extreme sort of version of keto where you just have the steak and the blue cheese and you don't have the spinach. I said, I'll do this crazy diet for 30 days because the women that I had seen that were doing this, and I'll especially point out Charlene Anderson because she is a model. She's got these gorgeous legs, and she had been doing carnivore for like, I think it was 15 years at the time, 20 years at the time, and she just looked amazing. I said, well, I'd like legs that look like that, please. Yes. So I did 30 days of carnivore, and it turned into, now it's almost 11 years. I started on Instagram, I don't know, probably about 8 years ago, just sort of sharing my meals and whatever. But for me, carnivore solved some issues that I didn't realize I could solve with diet, even a ketogenic diet. Like getting rid of that spinach really made a difference. And we can talk all about that, but I don't
Sure.
want to take up too much right now. But it's just been something that I feel so passionate about. And now I share this with people because I feel like people really do want to be healthy. They do want to follow a sustainable way of eating that they believe is good for them. And oftentimes when they ask for that advice from their physicians, their family, they get the wrong advice, especially women with lipedema. So I like to share what has worked for me, and in my experience, what I've seen work for other people. And it's very helpful. So I continue on in the space.
Yeah, very, very cool. And it's funny that you brought up the zeroing in on health. I was interviewing Dr. Lisa Wiedemann the carnivore doctor, and
Yeah.
she brought up that group on the show as well. That was one of the first groups that she came across, and she was like, "Oh, all these people are doing this crazy carnivore thing. I'm going to jump in." And then she started noticing all the same benefits that you started noticing. So you were, just to go back here a little bit, so you were basically ketogenic, still having like plants and veggies, and I've got some questions on how you felt when you started taking those things out. And then you came across the zeroing in on health group, and was that about 8 years ago when you found that, or was that a little bit earlier?
That was almost 11 years ago.
Okay. And then so you started going the carnivore route around that time?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Around that time.
So how were you eating before? Was it just basically you still had some plants in the diet and some spinach and those types of things, and you basically just went a little bit more animal based?
So my diet in the years between college and that turning carnivore
Yeah,
was kind of all over the place.
got it.
I did a lot of like smoothies. I did a lot of banana smoothies. I tried to be low fat. I tried to be low calorie. I tried all these things that, women do. I even signed up for like a LA weight loss at some point, some ridiculous thing where they try and sell you bars, just the ridiculous things that we do.
Yeah.
And it was when I went back to ketosis only for maybe like 3 months before I found zeroing in on health. So there was just a short period of time where I was keto, um, before I was carnivore. But, on and off throughout the years, I had gone back to Atkins many times. So what I loved about Atkins was generally that first 2-week induction period, which is ketosis. And so it's more than just low carb Atkins. Like it's, you're burning ketones. You're very low carb. You're less than 20 grams of total carb.
Feel
And
amazing? Yeah.
yeah, you just feel better. You feel lighter. But there's nothing, it does not compare to the benefit that you get from removing things like spinach
So
and berries.
let's talk about that. Okay,
Yeah.
so you were keto then for about a few months, and then you found the zeroing in on health group, and then tell me exactly how you felt. Like after you started taking some of the elements out, you got a little bit more
Yeah.
dialed in on the carnivore. Like what was like the first benefit you noticed?
One of the first things was the knee pain went
Got it.
away. And I was like, this is pretty great. Like my knees feel really good. Next thing is my migraine headaches went away. And I didn't even realize it, but I was getting migraine headaches, pretty frequently, several times a week, really bad ones where I would have to like lock myself in a dark closet because everything was so bright, everything was so painful. And it was very frequently, almost daily. Um, I said to myself, now, wait a minute, I have not had a migraine headache in a really long time. That's strange. Okay, that maybe it's carnivore, maybe not. Maybe they'll come back. And they haven't come back. So that whole daily pain of migraines is gone. The daily pain of the knee pain is gone. Things like anxiety and depression too, also gone, which is so strange to think that vegetables could cause that kind of disruption,
Yeah.
but it really does. I'll give you an example. Like ballroom dancing is my sport, right?
Okay.
And it's not an inexpensive sport. When you sign up for a lesson, you're paying for that lesson whether you show up or not. It's like hiring a personal trainer. And if you don't show up for that lesson, that money is gone. I was very frequently canceling lessons because I just felt like I can't get out of bed. Like I was feeling depressed. I was feeling anxious. In addition to that, I was experiencing this terrible pain of interstitial cystitis, which had gone on for years, all throughout my 20s, 30s. Interstitial cystitis is this painful bladder syndrome. And at the time, it wasn't very well understood. I think now people are making the connection between oxalate containing foods and those literally very sharp crystals that embed themselves in your bladder. Um, and the pain of cystitis. So getting rid of that pain in itself is life-changing like I cannot explain to you. So waking up in chronic pain or, feeling like you've got a UTI daily just is terrible. I don't wish that on anybody. And so for people with interstitial cystitis, if you're dealing with that, I say absolutely try getting rid of all the vegetables, getting rid of those high oxalate foods. has been, hugely key for me for that. And there's just a laundry list of
Yeah.
symptoms that, you hear these sort of like fish tales, right? Like carnivore is going to make you fly, it's going to make you invincible. And people, they speak so highly of it because it is this like life-changing thing to just fuel yourself properly and stop putting things in your body that are causing harm. And so if you've got any healing to do and you continue to put, you know, plant foods that have anti-nutrients in them or inflammatory compounds in them, like we like to call them phytonutrients, but they're actually pretty inflammatory. And people
Yeah.
say, oh, well, that's hormesis. We need this. But like, do we really need this all the time? And, getting rid of that can just be really helpful to get out of your own way and let your body heal.
Yeah, and it's so crazy to me because, like, going back to what you were just saying in terms of, like, these fish tales, right? It's like, you just hear so many different stories and anecdotes about people, like, the one that always comes to my mind is, like, Kayla Peterson, where, I mean, she was suffering at a young age from horrific arthritis and had, like, knee, ankle, hip joint replacements, multiple joint replacements by the time she was in college. And she was playing around with her diet, trying to figure things out, went carnivore, and like everything went away. And I think it's so crazy to me how something like changing your diet can be that powerful, because I think what's wild too is everyone has slightly different types of inflammatory issues that they're like, everyone's a little bit different, but some people have arthritis. Some people have, cognitive issues. Like for me, like ADD, ADHD, when I went, more heavily meat-based, very low carb, like keto, carnivore-ish, that was one of the main things I noticed. Like I was diagnosed with ADD and ADHD when I was in elementary school, and I had to take Ritalin and Adderall all the way up until I was 30. Yeah, because I thought I needed it.
Yeah.
If only I knew what a ketogenic diet was when I was, younger, but, that was in, like, the early '90s and 2000s and stuff. But, like, yeah, it's just so crazy to me how inflammation affects everyone differently, but by going on this one standardized diet approach, which is carnivore or keto, however you want to end up doing it. But if you're going on more of a strict carnivore approach and you're eliminating all those inflammatory anti-nutrients plants, how amazing, how many things that can fix. And like, it's kind of mind-boggling, right? Like,
It is.
yeah,
And not to mention too, like you brought up medication.
yeah,
This is like just a path to polypharmacy, right? Because you try to treat symptoms with a medication. Like if you go back and look at Michaela's record, she has this laundry list of medications that she was on, a ridiculous amount of medications to deal with the side effects of the medications. And we end up in this place where we think that a doctor or a prescription is going to help us. I mean, that would absolutely have been the path that I would have landed on. Like right now, I'm not on any prescription medication. And it's like, I didn't think that was possible for an adult. I grew up in a household where every adult I knew was on several prescription medications. It was
yeah,
just part of getting older.
yeah.
And I realize now we don't need to be medicated. We just need to be properly nourished.
I was 100%. I agree with you. And again, it just goes back to what I was saying, how crazy it is that what you eat, and it makes sense the longer that I do this stuff. It's just crazy to me how much the food we eat impacts how we feel and how we think. It's just so crazy to me. And when you went full blown carnivore, in terms of like body composition, like what did you notice anything there? Or to that?
Here's what I'll say about that. When I started carnivore, I was very high fat, like they say, eat the fatty meat, high fat carnivore. I was not concerned with calories because they always tell you do not be concerned with calories. Your body composition will become perfect if you just eat the fatty meat and leave out all else. Um, I didn't see that. That wasn't my experience.
Hmm.
And like I didn't have a ton of weight to lose, but I definitely had some body composition issues. When I first went for a DEXA, which was now then in 2020, I had this suspicion that I had lipedema. I knew that my legs were very resistant to fat loss, but I didn't realize that even with a carnivore diet, even after it was at that point, at least 5 years on a carnivore diet, that I could still be holding 40% body fat in my legs. Now,
Wow.
if you looked at me from the waist up, you'd say this girl's 15% body fat, 20% body fat at the most. But my body fat percentage was still at 36%. Like it was obese. 32% is where, you cross the line into obesity. And it was wild because on top, I'm like a size 4, but on the bottom, I was like a size 14. And when I went for that DEXA, it showed, it kind of proved to me like carnivore is not going to solve body composition for everyone. Um, if there are ways you can do carnivore that can help. And the way I was doing carnivore was not helping. It was doing all those healing things, like,
High fat approach, you mean?
yeah, my brain was feeling better. My joints were feeling better. My skin was better. My eczema went away, stuff like that. But the body composition changes, maybe I had lost like 5 pounds. But when I lost any more weight than that, I started to look very gaunt. Like it was like the weight was, I had tried doing extended fasting. I tried doing like 3-day fast up to a 7-day fast. I did intermittent fasting like every other day, and I would lose weight, but it always seemed to come from the top. When I went for that DEXA scan, I was like, oh, wow, something's really got to change here because um, this high fat, unlimited calorie version of carnivore was just not cutting it for me.
Got it.
And I started to, slowly start listening to the people who were talking about a higher protein approach. So people like Maria Emmerich, Craig Emmerich, Vanessa Spina on
Mm,
her Optimal Protein podcast was amazing. Ted Naiman, just these voices were crucial to me figuring out, like, Linda, you cannot. I used to have this saying, ribeyes are my macros.
mm.
And I was like, it was almost like a joke or like a point of pride. Like, how much fat can you eat? Like, I'm a high fat carnivore. I'm going to eat all the suet. And you can go back in my Instagram feed and you can see how much pork belly I was eating and how much raw suet I was eating and, putting the butter on things the way people do, eating only ribeyes, and it was doing me no favors. I was still getting swollen. I was still feeling very heavy in the legs. And that was borne out in this DEXA. I was like, "Man, I really need to change something." The DEXA tech said to me, Linda, it's strange because your weight is fine. And like it was fine. He said, but you're so under muscled. Like, he was looking at my legs and he said, you don't have a normal amount of muscle for legs this size. And I was like, oh, thank you. Thank you very much. But, he touched on something that I didn't realize at the time was a truth for most women with lipedema is we are under-muscled. Like, our muscle protein synthesis does not happen the same way that it happens in a body without lipedema. So we tend to have less muscle for our mass that we're moving. So if you're a 200-pound woman, you would expect to have a certain amount of muscle mass in your legs to move that mass. And somebody with standard obesity would have increased muscle in their legs. Women with lipedema don't get that increased muscle. And oftentimes this is the reason why their mobility and their gait is affected by the lipedema, because they literally cannot drag their legs across the floor. It's very uncomfortable and heavy feeling. In addition to the actual swelling that's going on, you have less muscle to sort of carry you through. So, anybody who's ever heard the term lipedema in relation to themselves, or they've been diagnosed with lipedema, you go down this path where you start to look at the stages of it and you think, oh my Lord, like, I'm going to end up in a wheelchair. I'm going to end up with no mobility. I'm going to end up morbidly obese. They would say to you, this is irreversible. This is not something that can be treated but with liposuction.
Mm.
And liposuction itself can lead to lymphatic issues. You end up with subsequent lymphedema, which is a whole nother issue, which sometimes comes along with lipedema, but not always. And it's not something that I wanted to do. I didn't want to just subject myself to liposuction. I don't really do well with surgery. So I said, all right, I'm going to listen to Ted Naiman. I am going to increase protein. I'm going to do what Maria says. And I'm going to take to heart what Craig Emmerich says about how the fat that you eat cannot just pass through you. It has to be sort of placed, like
Yeah.
it has to be absorbed, right? The fat you eat gets absorbed. Now, whether or not you release that fat has a lot to do with insulin. If you have lipedema, though, it confounds. So it's a problem. Keeping insulin low is not good enough for women with lipedema. That fat is very resistant
Hmm.
to weight loss in a calorie deficit. So we have to slowly chip away at the fat. And now since then, since that 2020 DEXA, and I've switched to a higher protein carnivore approach, like the incredible change I've seen in my legs it's amazing. It's like to a point where I didn't think I would be able to get it. I'll say to you that I'm down to 25% body fat,
Oh, wow.
which from a 36% I didn't think I'd ever get there. And so it just keeps improving. Things are better. And I'm just going to keep going with this. There are several reasons why several reasons why a higher protein carnivore approach works for women with lipedema. But yeah, I'm sticking with it. And especially for that population, that's what I promote.
Interesting. So you started doing the higher fat approach, you said around 2020, correct?
Yeah.
And then
No, I'm sorry. That was 2015,
oh,
higher fat.
okay. No, but then when did you switch the macros to go higher protein, more moderate fat?
That would be about 2020.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha. And then so just out of curiosity, what does a day look like in terms of eating for you? Like when you wake up, do you eat in the morning? Do you typically skip breakfast? I was curious to see like what your day-to-day looks like and then what the macro looks like in terms of the protein you're taking in on a day-to-day and the amount of fat and then the carbs I'm assuming are very,
Yeah.
very low.
Yeah. So every day I do a protein coffee, and I know people have their feelings about protein powders, but I happen to love it. I do train in ballroom most mornings, so I will have my protein coffee. It gets me going, keeps my blood sugar stable for the ride over, and I do my training just on that protein coffee. And then lunch will
What if you don't
be
mind me
sorry.
asking, what's in the protein coffee? Like, is it like a protein powder with coffee or
It is.
okay.
It's a beef isolate protein powder. I use Equip.
Oh, I love Equip. Yeah,
You've heard of them.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I use that brand. I don't have an issue with stevia. Like I've tested against CGM. For me, there's no drop in blood glucose from like an insulin response, and there's no rise in blood glucose from the cocoa or anything. So I'm pretty happy with all of the Equip flavors, and that goes in the coffee. I put a little magnesium, potassium, sodium in there.
Ooh, that sounds delicious. Yeah.
And then, I come back for lunch. I'll do ground beef. I'll do eggs. I'll do some steak, maybe what's left over from the night before. It varies. I I am sort of like a recipe developer. So I make a lot of recipes. I show a lot of recipes. So every day is kind of different. There are these people that have the same thing every day. And they're like, oh, my days are so boring and they're so consistent. My days are just like never the same. So it's difficult to say what I eat in a day. But generally, I eat a lot of eggs, beef. I eat chicken, a ton of seafood, a lot of non-fat yogurt, like a high protein yogurt
Mhm.
is such a cheat code if you are
Yeah.
trying to increase protein without increasing your energy intake. By energy intake, I mean, caloric intake. If you're trying to get your protein up there, things like non-fat Greek yogurt or skyr are just phenomenal. And I attribute the increase in protein to my improved body composition. Like my muscle mass has gone up considerably and my fat mass has gone down because of those things. So when I now eat steak for lunch or for dinner, it's typically going to be like a flat iron steak or a sirloin steak or a New York strip steak. It's
Mhm.
not going to be a ribeye, and it's certainly not going to be a ribeye topped with butter,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, so a few things actually. I am big on I make a protein yogurt every single night. I use the Equip protein as well. It's almost I treat it as it's almost like a second dinner. So I'm like a 2 meal a day guy. I'll have lunch and then I'll have dinner. And then I will every single night I make a protein yogurt and I'll do 2 servings of the organic the organic Greek yogurt from Costco, the Kirkland brand. It's a little watery, I would say. If I'm being honest, it's a little watery. The best is the Faye brand, like the
I'm
0%.
with you.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
But I since I go to Costco so much, I just buy it in like those. I literally take a case out of Costco with like six things of yogurt because I have it every night. And what I'll do is I'll do 2 servings of the Greek yogurt, and then I'll throw in a scoop of protein. I'll throw in a scoop of collagen powder, which is like another 10 grams of protein. And then here's the trick. I put in cinnamon. Cinnamon makes it taste like a little bowl of Christmas. So
Uh-huh.
you throw in some cinnamon, some blueberries. If you're full blown carnivore, obviously you can leave out the blueberries if you want, but I'll throw in some fruit like frozen blueberries, and then I'll do like maybe a little scoop of peanut butter. And it feels like the
My kryptonite.
yeah, exactly. Especially that Costco peanut butter. That Costco peanut butter,
I don't touch it. I haven't touched it in
it
years.
is crack. Yeah. But so there is 70 grams of protein in that bowl of yogurt. So it's like I have that every night, and it helps me hit my protein goals for the day. Consume if you're trying to put on some muscle mass, like, and I've had so many different people on the podcast in regards to how many grams of protein per pound of body weight. Some people say 0.8, some people say a gram of protein. I've had some doctors on here that'll say anywhere, but if you're in a muscle building phase, you want 1.2 to 1.4 grams of protein, which is a lot. But eating a lot of protein is very filling. It's the satiating macronutrient. So if you're trying to get some more protein in, or you're trying to change your body composition, the protein yogurt, just for the listeners, it's a great way to go, because even if you're somewhat full, you can put down that it's because it's more of like a dessert. It's tasty. It's not like you're eating another chicken breast or another lean piece of meat that might be hard to take down. It just
Yeah.
makes it really easy to hit the protein goal. But so I'm with you there on the Greek yogurt. It's a super cheat code, and it feels like a treat, 100%.
I love it.
I wanted to go back. So 2 things I want to touch on. I want to touch on the CGM stuff and some of the data that you've been collecting, but going back to like your day to day and what you're eating, because I think sometimes people, a lot of the time, will think like carnivore is so isolating, or, there's no variability. So therefore it's not sustainable. But it sounds like to me, you have found a way to make it work and incorporate it into the balance of your day-to-day, your family life. Like, are there any tricks that you do for maybe meal prep that helps you stay on track, keep things sustainable, offers you some variety over the course of the day-to-day, the week-to-week?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is what I hope to bring to the masses when I've got a book coming out. It should be orderable in 2026. What I want people to understand is that there is a sustainable way to do carnivore that is not so strict that you can live a like relatively normal life. Sit down with your family for dinner, for a delicious meal. Like, if you want Italian food, I can do this for you. I can help you with an Italian food recipe. So basically, what I want people to understand is that you don't have to be strict for strictness' sake. You have to be strict enough that you are putting into you what helps you and avoiding what harms you. And if you have an autoimmune condition, like, absolutely stay lion diet. You want to heal your gut, stay lion diet, which is just, meat, salt, water. But if that is not your situation, if you just want to feel your best, but you're not at death's door where you need carnivore, you may find it very difficult to sustain carnivore, because you're like, this isn't worth it. I wasn't really doing that bad. I was feeling all right. Like, maybe I had a little eczema, or maybe I was feeling a little achy or headachy, but it's definitely not worth just eating bowls of ground beef and butter. Like, I'm fine. I'm going back to Chipotle. Like, I don't want to live like this. It is not sustainable to do this bland carnivore. And some people will say, you need to change your perspective. Like, food should not be our entertainment. But get real, right? Food is very much a part of American culture, and it is very much a part of how we relate to one another, how we express love to one another, how we communicate. Like, if I'm going to meet up with you, maybe we'll have a cup of coffee, or like maybe we're going to share a meal. But to sit face to face and just like not have a meal, that would be weird.
Sure.
So having a meal with somebody is just part of the human experience. And when you isolate yourself in a strict version of carnivore that maybe is not quite necessary for you, it is very hard to sustain. So adding things like vinegars, lemon juice, like oregano, basil, some cilantro. These are like non-toxic things that can add a lot of flavor and variety to your meals. I add some tomato to my meals because it doesn't affect me. And with that little addition of tomato paste, I feel like I'm experiencing, my Italian childhood again.
Mhm.
It does me no harm. It only makes me happy. And I can sustain carnivore this way 11 years. And if you're going to pull my carnivore card because I put tomato paste in my, beef only chili, then I'm
Mhm.
sorry. Sorry, you can have my carnivore card. But
Yeah.
that is something that, I think helps a lot of people. If we can make carnivore a little less weird for, normal standard American dieters, I think a lot of people's health would be improved because it would just make it way more feasible to do. In terms of like, your question about like meal prep
Mhm.
and being always prepared for, like how to maintain your carnivore diet, I love to just tell people always have some cooked meat available in the fridge. So if you're cooking dinner, you're doing steaks for you and your husband, don't just cook 2 steaks, like cook 4 steaks and then have some in the fridge, because some of that steak is going to be your lunch the next day. And it is way better to reach for some leftover ground beef that you've got, just sitting there waiting to be turned into something delicious, or have that leftover steak. It's way better to grab those things than to grab what's always available in our refrigerators is the cheese, right?
Mhm.
Like that's always there. Like no matter what, you've always got some cheese. It's carnivore. Unless you're dairy free, you're going to be reaching for that cheese when you're just hungry. And that doesn't do us any favors in terms of sticking to a calorie deficit. If that's what you're, if you're going for weight loss, having mozzarella sticks is, not going to do you any favors. So things like that, I just, I think people need to understand that they can enjoy their food more than maybe they've been told they can. And we don't have to convince ourselves that a bowl of ground beef is the most amazing thing. We don't have to pretend like we don't enjoy flavorful food. We can do Chipotle at home with really good ingredients, and keep it pretty carnivore, like seasoned and carnivore. Um, and we don't have to go back into those, excuse me, old patterns. Oftentimes people will just quit carnivore because they say it's not sustainable. And then they end up back in, you know, tortilla chips and donuts and, burritos and stuff. And it's like, we don't need that. You can relax a little bit and get that nice, sustainable carnivore, not have to go like balls to the wall and then fall off the rails.
100%. And I would say for the listeners, anyone listening to this, the two things that people need to do no matter what, it's meal prep slash cooking at home. Like, if more people just cooked their own food, even if it wasn't carnivore, I would bet over the course of a 5-year span, if more people started cooking at home, that would fix all of our all of the macro issues when it comes to obesity, chronic disease, people being overweight, and then having all the issues that come along with that. That would fix a lot of people's problem just cooking at home, right?
I agree.
And then in terms of like the meal prep, I am a big meal prep guy. Like I cook all of my family's food. I cook my food, my wife's food, and my kids' food on Sunday. It's a little bit of it's a little bit of a thing. It takes some time, but it's time well spent because we don't necessarily need to go back and forth and talk about what we're going to eat throughout the week. We've got the Teton Ranch hot dogs from Costco. We've got sausages for the kids. My wife has her food and a bunch of different other types of meats that I cook. Like this past week, I made um, like Greek turkey dill meatballs. And so what I'm saying here is you gotta meal prep and then cook in bulk, right? Like you said, don't just make 2 steaks, make 4, because then you'll have lunch the next day, and that helps to keep things on track. So you're not digging through the fridge or the pantry and eating something that's gonna just take you off the rails. But that's a huge thing, man. Meal prepping and cooking in bulk is the way to go, like hands down. And if you're not gonna do it, it's gonna be really hard to stay on track with any diet, in my opinion.
Yeah, because one thing, and I don't do like a full week, of prep. I typically I'm just doing like I'm cooking every day, but I'm not cooking for every meal. So sometimes even just that is good. You don't need to cook at every meal, because if the thought of cooking a fresh steak for lunch is just overwhelming, you're in the middle of the day, then yeah, cook it the night before. You don't have to do 7 days of repetitive meals, which oftentimes people think is what meal prep is going to be. It's going to be, the same turkey in a bowl with, turkey and broccoli and rice in a bowl. It's like a typical meal prep, right? Chicken. And then you're going to eat that same thing. And by the end of day 7, you're like, I can't stand to look at this bowl of beef or turkey or whatever it
Yeah,
is anymore. And so you can meal prep. It doesn't have to be the same exact meal every day.
100% agree.
Yeah.
Going back to some of the CGM stuff, I wanted to get back to in terms of tracking. I was just out of curiosity. So when you went, because I played around with the CGM, my wife and I both played around with the CGM like a handful of years ago, and we were, tracking our stuff to see like what spikes blood sugar. And what was fun, what was wild is the 2 things that spiked my blood sugar the most was hot yoga and a Starbucks coffee. It put me up to like 180. It was wild. But I was curious for you, especially like maybe going higher protein, was there anything unique or unusual that you noticed through the CGM tracking that you saw when you were going higher protein out of
Yeah.
curiosity?
I'm glad you brought that up, because people will often say, like, I can't go high protein. It's going to spike my glucose. Like my A1C is going to go through the roof on
Sure.
this higher protein approach. Now, there's definitely some people who a higher protein approach is not for. If you find that your blood glucose is really going exceptionally high, then maybe you need to go down to like, I like to say 1 gram protein per pound of body weight, but
Okay.
I live at more like 1.5. So really on your very, very high end, that's where I like to be.
Okay.
Um, and when I put the CGM on and I did the comparison, my blood glucose ran about 5 points higher. That's it.
That's not
Like,
much.
that's it. It's not much. And over the years, my A1C is like so consistently low. It's like 5.2. It is just, I don't have a high A1C. I don't have high blood glucose. I mean, I'm waking up at a normal time of day. I'm not waking up early with, super high blood glucose or anything like that. So this idea of, people say protein turns to a cupcake in your blood. If you eat too much protein, it's the equivalent of having a cupcake. It's just not, at least not in my experience. So I will always recommend, if you're worried about that, put a CGM on, because I do oftentimes recommend people eat a lot more protein than they are used to having.
Hmm.
And so just to sort of allay the fears for them, I'll say, why don't you just throw CGM on and see for yourself, or do the finger prick and see for yourself, test your blood glucose for a couple of days, before meals, during meal, after meal, half hour or an hour after your meal, and just see what your meals are doing to your blood glucose. But for me, it was a shift of about 5 points, nothing that would make me concerned. And I am with you. The thing that increases my blood glucose the most is gluconeogenesis that would
Mm,
happen when I'm training. So when I'm dancing ballroom, my glucose goes up. And it's like, what a great thing. Like, I need that fast energy. I'm going to produce that for myself. Thank you very much. It's like, we're fine here. Gluconeogenesis is working as it should. My blood glucose goes up and then it comes back down.
yeah.
So that's what I've noticed. Wearing a CGM to me is like such a great investment, even if you only do it for, 2 weeks at a time. And you only do it for 2 weeks one time. the way that people get to see the foods that are spiking their blood
Mm-hmm.
glucose, or they can see how, even though they think they're eating what they're calling like slow carb,
Mm,
or they don't go low carb, they go slow carb. The area under the curve, like when you get this moderate rise, but it goes on for a very long time, the area under the curve is like identical to a very dangerous blood glucose spike. And you just don't want to live at a raised blood glucose all the time. We know this causes insulin resistance. And so when you can see that that great, nourishing, steel cut oatmeal thing that you're having in the morning is doing you no favors, you can take that insight and carry it through, and it can sustain you to say for the rest of your life, like, I know exactly what oatmeal does, to me. I know exactly what these healthy, whole wheat pastas are doing to my blood sugar. And, people can then realize, oh, maybe I can't lose this belly fat. It's because of my pasta and my, healthy brown rice.
absolutely. And I had a couple questions here in regard going back to people curious about carnivore and what you typically say to people. And then I have another question that kind of backs up behind that in regards to like what to do when maybe the body adapts or carnivore stops working and we gotta maybe make some shifts or changes, whether it's the macros, the food, whatever the case is. But what do you tell people when they are like carnivore curious and they're daunted, going back to what we were saying earlier about the boredom or the lack of variety or maybe even the cost of meat? I know that's becoming a thing, like meat's getting more expensive, so are eggs. Like, what do you typically tell people that are maybe daunted about some of those things before they start the diet? Is there anything in particular that you will kind of like lay out to them?
I mean, I'll explain to people that they're probably spending, as far as the cost of carnivore, they're probably spending a lot more money on a standard American diet than they would be on a carnivore diet. It's incredible the amount of, like the cost of protein or the cost of fat to get your energy can be so low compared to what people are buying. Like if you think like, you're, especially for beverages, like people who are buying beverages, it's like if you can switch to water, you're going to save so much money. And then if you are doing restaurants, I mean, it's twice the cost of cooking at home. So there's that you're going to save if you're cooking at home.
Totally.
And if you're doing, like empty calories, low calories, you're going to find that you're eating more frequently a bunch of junk food, and maybe you're not accounting for that money because it's not your weekly shop, like where you're like, on a Sunday I'm going to go and I'm going to spend so much money on this shopping day. But then throughout the week you're stopping for a coffee, you're stopping and picking up a granola bar, and so the money is really like, if you can get down to, there's nothing cheaper than, like ground beef and eggs cost per what you need to feed yourself. Like that's it. That's the ultimate. Um, there's no processed food that's going to give you that value of eggs. Even the cost of eggs is higher than it used to be. Eggs and ground beef, anything that's on sale that is a single ingredient
Mhm.
whole cut of meat, or that used to be a whole cut of meat. So you can go into the supermarket and you can find out from that butcher manager what time of day they typically discount the meat, and they say, I need to sell it by this day. And so they'll put it on like a manager special. If you pop into your grocery store and you're picking up nothing but manager specials, like you're living life
That's
like
a
a
good
king.
idea. I never even
Yeah.
thought about that. That's a
Yeah.
really good idea.
You can do that. I mean, it depends on your schedule, obviously, but if you can do that, you can get some really great things. Sticking with the single ingredient foods is oftentimes just so much less expensive.
Totally.
Um, and in terms of like people being afraid that it's gonna, harm them in some way, is that what you mean? Like that they're
Maybe
it's
more
not
so
gonna
like on
be.
the button. Well, I didn't even think of that, but yeah, like I was more so talking about like the boredom or the sustainability route. But that's actually a really good point that you just brought up. Like, what about for the people that are thinking like, oh, cholesterol, yada yada yada?
Yeah, I mean, it's just not a thing. It's very difficult to argue with people who have been taught the same thing that their doctors have been taught. And then we
My
know
mom.
better. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
so hard, right? You try and have these
Yeah.
conversations and you try and say, well, listen, that science is outdated,
And wrong.
was never good, right?
Yeah.
It was always bought and biased. It's so things like cholesterol are like a non-issue, and you can point to things like high LDL is actually really positive in terms of longevity, right? We know that like lowering LDL will increase all-cause mortality, and certainly going on a statin to lower your LDL does nobody any favors. And it's very hard to um, argue with somebody who just doesn't want to hear it. So typically, you know, I don't talk to a lot of people, try and like push carnivore on them unless they come to me and they say, hey, I really want to try this. Like, how can I make it sustainable?
Yeah.
But if somebody is of the mindset, like, this would never work for me, like, I can't do this, it's hard for me to convince them that they can. What I will try to say is just give it a few days. Like, do it for a few days, even 3, 4, 5 days. If you can commit to that, oftentimes they will get a little bit of a sense of feeling better, even if it's just from the simple removal of carbohydrate, where everybody will start to lose glycogen and some water, and they'll get like a whoosh, and they'll say, wow, like low carb is really working. That's water weight, sure, but it's a great trick for people to see that a low carb or a ketogenic thing can really knock some inflammation off of you right away. And sometimes that's motivating enough for people to stick with it for a little bit longer. And then they start to realize these other symptoms that they didn't realize they could fix with diet are starting to fall away. They then become self-motivated to stay with it.
Yeah, you brought up something interesting, and I know we were talking about Maria Emmerich before we started recording, but she had a great clip that I posted today, actually, where she was talking about people like doom and gloom people, and the people that are like, "Oh, this will never work," or "I can't have this." It's like, man, you can't. It's going to be hard to convert people that are not like open and willing to try something. Like if they're going into any sort of a diet where it's like, oh, like I can't eat this, this isn't going to work, they're never going to see success, right? It's the people that are like open and saying, "Oh, well, I can't have that, but look at all the things that I can have. I can have this, I can have that." Those are the types of people, in my opinion, no matter what, they're not only going to be successful with their diet and the progress that they're going to see, they're just going to be successful in life with a mindset like that. It's key no matter what when you're switching your diet to have that mindset. Don't think about what you can't have, think about what you can,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Absolutely.
Um, I was curious to get your thoughts on what you do, especially when people are coming to you and asking you questions like, what do you do when carnivore stops working for whatever reason? Like, yeah, and I'll lay out maybe a couple scenarios. Like maybe they're hitting that weight loss plateau, which could be an easy fix of changing the macros, bumping up the protein, lowering the fat. But maybe for some other issues too, like maybe they're running into like sleep disruption, electrolyte imbalances, restless leg syndrome, like a bunch of other these things because they don't have the glycogen, they don't have the stored water weight in the body, they might be losing electrolytes. What do you typically do when carnivore maybe stops working?
Well, it's a case by case
Sure.
basis. So the people that come to me, interestingly enough, carnivore has generally stopped working for them when they start gaining weight. And they say they're not coming to me by saying, carnivore is working and then now I've got leg cramps. What's going on? Because I think people who have been in the carnivore space for a while, they've been looking at, all of these different, influencers, doctors. And so they can easily search up like what's causing my leg cramps. And they'll say, oh, maybe I need some magnesium, or I need some potassium, or they'll hear the anecdotal stories of like vinegar helping and stuff like that, and they'll try those things. But when people come to me and they say carnivore stopped working, it's typically an issue of overeating fat. It's typically just that same issue. I run into it all the time. Um, the second issue that I run into is people just consistently undereating, period. Like undereating on all macros. And they say, I did really great. I was carnivore for 6 months or 5 months and I lost all this weight and now I'm stalled out and I'm not losing any more weight. And I'll go through what their, daily intake is, and it's just far too low. Like it can be well below their base metabolic rate. And so they're just depressed metabolically. And then you've got to get into, getting them back up to a normal amount of calories, something where their metabolism will start to work more properly. So for most, I'll say it's an over energy consumption thing and they're gaining weight. But for the people who are stalled out, oftentimes it is a under eating situation because my clients are mainly women. I have some men, but mainly women. And we know how to diet. I mean, women, especially women of my age, we grew up in the, diet culture. We know how to diet. We know how to lose weight. And when you cut calories and that doesn't work, then they're like, I'm at my wit's ends because I'm eating 700 calories a day and I'm not losing weight. Carnivore is not working. And it's like, whoa, 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 you can't blame that on carnivore. Like no adult should be eating 700 calories a day. We've got to work you back up and get things going again.
Totally.
So there's that.
Got it. So it's either, so to wrap that part up, it's basically either A, you're under eating in general, or B, on the complete flip side, you're just completely overeating fat, and that's probably why you're stalling out.
I'm not going to say this is the guarantee for
Yeah.
everybody,
Yeah.
but generally that's what I see. I will rarely see people that are, I don't think I've ever seen somebody who's just overeating on protein and they're gaining weight. I've never come across that. Typically people are either not tracking and they think they're eating enough and they're not eating enough, or they're not tracking and they tell me I've been eating, pork belly for breakfast, butter on my steak for lunch. I have, full fat yogurt, of course, because it's the only legitimate yogurt out there. They eat the 10% yogurt, and then they'll have like brown butter bite snacks
Yeah.
and a stick of butter because they were feeling a little munchy. It's like, oh my gosh. So yeah.
The stick of butter stuff like drives me. When I see people doing the sticks of butter, like
Mm.
the stick of butter on the steak is like that to me. That's just like, wow, okay, that's ridiculous. But like some of the carnivore influencers that are just eating the stick of butter like in the hand, I'm like, come on, guys, like
It's like,
that's
yeah,
that's a little much.
I think that, it's the kind of thing where if you're a very large person, like I'm only 5'2"
Hmm.
and a half, you know, if you're super tall, if you're super big, if you're young, if you're jacked, you can take on far more energy
True.
than someone like me,
True.
or someone, petite. Um, I just can't imagine being able to handle that. And, at the same time, like I was saying, there are a few reasons why a higher protein approach works for people with lipedema is that to process all that fat, if I were to eat a stick of butter, all that fat would, come into me and need to be packaged into chylomicrons and it would go right into my lymphatic system. If you've got an impaired lymphatic system like we do in the lipedema community, it's like the worst thing you can possibly do for your swelling is to pile a bunch of fat into the system all at one time and think that you're going to be okay. Your legs are just going to blow up immediately from swelling because your lymph fluid is going to back up at your lymph nodes from all that fat that you've taken in. And so, sometimes people will not necessarily need less fat than they've been eating, but they just need to space out the fat that they've been eating. And that can oftentimes help with the lymphatic issues that some women I help deal with. So, but yeah, eating a stick of butter never went well for me. Like there were times, like I said, where I was eating a ton of suet and then I would think, why are my legs swollen? Like this shouldn't be, this is supposed to be super healthy. Why are my legs swollen? And it's just that amount of fat at one time. Um, like I said, it never did me any favors.
I was curious because I know we're kind of coming up here on time, and I've got some other questions here. I've got at the end of each podcast, I'll do like rapid fire questions. But I'm curious because since you've been in the space for a while now, like, and we've seen the evolution of like keto to carnivore. Where do you see like the carnivore diet going? Where do you see like the diet culture going from here in like the next 3 to 5 years?
Oh man, I wish it would go more carnivore. I see, you know, publicly. there has been a push for more protein, right?
Mm-hmm.
We see this because of some of the weight loss drugs that are now being promoted very heavily. People understand that they will lose muscle if they don't increase protein. And so I love this for getting in enough protein. I don't love the fact that people are leaning in to medications where there are cases where maybe they wouldn't need those medications. They could just try a low carb or a carnivore approach. But still, I feel like diet culture is shifting, that people are understanding that protein is pretty key.
Yeah.
Whereas we used to think of protein as just, you have to meet your minimum and we have to get, like 30 grams of protein or something ridiculous. So something like a 4-ounce portion 3 times a day is not going to cut it. Like I don't agree with that kind of minimum. So hopefully this will continue and higher protein approaches will continue. I think everybody, not everybody, there are a lot of people who think that keto is still a fad diet. They think that it's a dangerous diet, that it will lead to ketoacidosis, or that they are equivalent. And so hopefully as time goes on, more and more people understand that a ketogenic diet is not dangerous, not harmful, actually pretty helpful. So I think that keto will increase in popularity, not decrease in popularity as time goes on, just because I think, the knowledge will spread. And the same thing for carnivore. I think that the voices in carnivore are getting a little bit louder. Like the Netflix documentaries are
Mm-hmm.
moving away from vegan propaganda and more towards regenerative information, carnivore information. you know, Being a steward of the land, eating ancestrally appropriate uh, foods and maintaining our planet at the same time. The truth is that a carnivore diet is what helps us
Totally.
sustain the topsoil, right? Without those animals, it all turns to dust. And the vegans have sort of like a good idea at heart. They too want health, and they want to save the animals, and they want to save the planet, and they think that their way of doing it is going to get there. But unfortunately, out of the two of us, one of us is correct,
Yeah.
and they are not correct.
Yeah.
And so,
I would
and
agree.
so,
Yeah.
right. And so we have to just sort of keep teaching that the way forward is not, a vegan diet, and it's not necessarily a vegetarian diet. It can be a mixed diet,
Yeah.
but if your health conditions are such that you would benefit from a low carbohydrate diet, like you've just got to do that for a while. I mean, there are some people, everyone's got a story, right? Like my grandfather smoked until he was 100 and he was fine, right? Or my aunt was a vegan until she was 100 and she was fine. I don't think that story's ever really come out. But people will claim like I've never felt better. But the truth is that you do need to have an appropriate amino acid profile,
Yes.
vitamins and minerals to get everything in that you need. And so I think that it will just continue. I hope that I can be part of the movement to help bring carnivore to a wider audience in the next few years, and that more people will accept it and not see us as like some weird fad cult, that we, for some reason, that doesn't make sense to them, are getting rid of plants. There's a reason. And so hopefully we can continue to teach people about that.
Yeah, I would agree with you 100%, especially on the protein stuff and just the agriculture stuff. It's like, yeah, we have to have animals roaming. It's not we don't need more corn and soy fields and wheat fields. We need more cows grazing, and that's going to be better for the entire ecosystem 100%. Um Before we wrap up, like I said, I got some rapid fire questions here. So, what's the number one myth about carnivore that drives you crazy?
Well, the number one is it's got to be that you have to add fat, or that you have to only eat fatty meat.
Mm,
This drives me crazy because that term fatty meat, I think, goes out of someone's mouth with good intentions, but is received in the wrong way. I think when people hear that, they think that means ribeye, ribs, or brisket, right?
mhm.
But there is a whole cow worth of cuts that are also fatty meat, and people don't necessarily think about those. And if they would, they could lower their fat intake and see better results. I remember specifically an interview that Michaela Peterson did. Somebody was asking her, what do you eat for breakfast? And her answer was strip loin.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you eat for lunch? Strip loin.
Yeah.
And what do you have for dinner? Strip loin. Now, a strip loin is a New York strip steak, right?
Yeah.
So if you
Leaner than a ribeye.
much leaner than a ribeye. And so, she is like one of the carnivore queens, right? She's doing it the right way. You can't tell Michaela, sorry, you're doing carnivore the wrong way. But yet people will hear eat the fatty meat and they'll say, I cannot have a New York strip steak. That's just too lean. You can absolutely have New York strip steak. You can have most of the cow. If you're trying to lean out a little bit, stay away from the brisket, stay away from the ribeye, eat the rest. You're going to end up in a fantastic spot where you're getting great amount of fat and a great amount of protein. So, and then there is just absolutely no need to add butter to your cuts of beef, like zero need.
100%.
Unless you're talking about a tenderloin.
Yeah.
Like those are, if you were eating nothing but tenderloins, I'd say add some butter or add some bacon.
100%. What's the hardest part about being carnivore that nobody talks about?
Well, that's interesting. The hardest part, I guess it's just that you have to be prepared more than the average person. So things like social events, you have to think about,
True.
if I'm going to be out for 6 or 7 hours, what's great is you can be out for 2 or 3 hours, right? If you're fat fueled, you'll be absolutely fine. You can
You're not
fast
thinking
for
about
those few
food.
hours. You're not thinking about food,
Yeah.
right? So that's great. But if you're going to be out for 6 or 7 hours, or there's going to be a meal served, you have to sort of prepare for that. You have to say to yourself, okay, should I bring something with me? Because you're trying to avoid, seed oils, or you're trying to avoid added sugars or whatever it may be. So you just have to be prepared. That's probably the worst part of staying carnivore. The rest of it's like, pretty fantastic.
Yeah, well, and I was gonna say, I was talking to Ben Giles, who I had on my podcast a couple days ago. And we were talking about just like one of the hardest parts in general in regards to like eating out. For me, even if I'm going out, I can, especially if we're going to a place that serves steak, I'll get a steak. But a lot of the times, like it's just not enough food. You know what I mean? Like I need to eat a lot of food when I eat. So that's the crappy part because when I was giving in this example. My mom came to visit. We went to a nice restaurant and all the dishes were like 50, 60 bucks a piece. And I was going to have some sea bass. And my main question to the guy was, how many ounces is this sea bass? And it was like 6. So I'm like, dude, for a $60 dinner, you're going to give me like 6 ounces of sea bass with like some fingerling potatoes on the side and some carrots. I'm like, no, man, that ain't going to fricking do it. And so a lot of the times what I have to do is I have to eat before I leave the house. Like I'll do 2 dinners. Like I'll maybe have some burger patties just to fill me up, satiate me. And then I can go and sit down and have a normal dinner and be full. But
this is such a great tip.
Yeah.
I do this too.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Eat before you go out, because then that small 4 to 6 ounce portion is going to be livable, and you're not going to be so angry when you're sitting there and everyone else has got their loaded baked potato and they're, feeling stuffed and ready for cheesecake, and you've just had 4 ounces of cod and you're thinking to yourself, this is terrible.
God. Yeah. Yeah. If someone wanted to try, this is the last one. If someone wanted to try carnivore for 30 days, what 3 rules would you have them follow so they could see success?
Oh, I think it depends on where they're coming from. Like, define success for me.
Success would be, I would say, maybe not cheating on it during the 30 days, coming out the other end, feeling better, dropping a little bit of weight. And I would also even add success being like they would want to continue to do it because of the way that they feel.
Okay, perfect. So for somebody like that, I would say, here's what you do. You focus on animal foods. Don't worry about what anyone else tells you should be eating. Eat the meat that you like, right? Go back to the basics. What they taught in Zeroing In on Health was eat the meat that you like, that you can afford. Okay. And if you just do that, and if you have meat on hand for whenever you're hungry, you will find it so sustainable, and you will have the meats that you love. If that is chicken wings, then have nothing but chicken wings, And if you get sick of chicken wings and you say, well, but I really love shrimp, but they said I can't have shrimp because shrimp is too lean, right? Shrimp doesn't work on the carnivore diet. I say, forget all that. Stop listening to everyone else telling you that, whatever cuts you have to have. And if you if you want to have shrimp, have shrimp.
Yeah.
Just eat those animal foods. Try and focus on getting rid of the other foods. So for that first month, the focus is just going to be staying consistent, just getting your ingredients right, like just cutting out those foods that you have been drawn to or addicted to for so many years. That's a really big deal. So for you to step away from the rice and potatoes for some people is a really big deal. Especially like we talked about, it's part of your culture to sit with the rice and the beans. It is very hard to just eat the meat. So if you can say to somebody, yeah, I understand that, the meat that you eat and you serve in your family, it's got some sauce on it, but just let's try for a few weeks to forget about the sauce. You're going to do carnivore a little bit imperfectly, but you're going to not have the tostones. You're not going to have your plantains. You're not going to have your rice and beans. If you can just have the meat, like you're going to be on fire. You're going to feel better. And then it makes the next month all that much easier. And then as time goes by, it will become much easier to sort of tweak what they're doing. They'll feel better about themselves. They'll feel better about the diet. And they'll say, what else can I do to improve even more? And then you can start, turning knobs and flipping switches. If you try to tell somebody who is on a standard American diet, who's, like eating Takis with their lunch, that now they have to just eat meat and water, like they're just not going to stick with it at all. And so you've got to meet them where they are and say your focus for the month is going to be getting rid of all the processed foods and the carbohydrates. Whatever meat you like, eat it. If it includes pepperoni for the first month, eat it. Salami, sure. Cheese, go for it. Because at that point, we're not going to worry about are you, hitting the right macros. For the first month, we just want you to get your ingredients right.
So well said. So well said. Before we wrap up here, Linda, anything new coming up for you?
Oh, well, I'm in the middle of writing a book,
Cool.
actually. So we talked about this for just a second. Yeah, it should be, I'm not allowed to say the title of the book yet. Pre-orders will happen probably in the late winter, spring of 2026. But it's going to have some, like carnivore, like philosophy, FAQs, some myth busting, some biology up front, and then like 100 recipes in the back that will help make carnivore like very delicious, very appealing. It should be food that you would want to sit down with your family and share with them. Great meals. So like, appetizers, like bready things, noodly things, casserole things, and,
Awesome.
some basics. Like, hopefully I'm going to get in there like just a carnivore basic section where it's just like meat plus heat, right? Where you're
Hmm.
just like, people sometimes they're intimidated by carnivore because they've never cooked a steak themselves. And so beyond the recipes, I think people need to understand how simple carnivore can be and
Hmm.
that you don't need to do recipes. You literally just need to understand what temperature you need to cook specific meats at and to what final temperature, and that you need a meat thermometer, that you need to flip it or not, or grill it or braise it or whatever it may be. So hopefully it'll be a lot of great information to make carnivore more approachable for people.
And
So look for that.
you said that's going to come out in you said spring of 2026?
Hopefully spring 2026 you'll be able to order it.
Okay.
And then it will probably be, like delivery around, Thanksgiving or somewhere around there, 2026.
Very cool. How exciting. Good
Yeah.
for you. Props to you. That's awesome.
Thanks.
Well, this was fantastic, Linda. Where can people find you online, get in contact with you, follow you, all that good stuff?
Yeah, so I am the Carnitarian on Instagram, and that's where you can reach me. I have a YouTube channel that is the Carnitarian Life, and I've got my line of spice blends, which you can get over at thecarnitarian.com. That's called The Carnitarian Presents. Makes fantastic meatballs for an Italian meal. I do a phenomenal chili blend, which is like super easy. It just takes some water, a little bit of tomato paste, which I'll call out as optional. And it's the best chili you'll ever have in your life. And then there's a taco blend too to make like meatballs more flavorful and delicious. So you can do, like a faux carnivore nachos thing
Oh my
with pork
gosh.
rinds or something.
Love it.
It's just delicious.
That sounds great.
Well, check out the website, check out the blends. The blends are great, and I make them all by hand and send them out. And then where else? I'll be on Facebook soon. So go to my, actually, I'm on Facebook now at the Carnitarian, but people should check me out on Instagram for the most updated information, recipes and book information, stuff like that. But hopefully soon we'll be on Facebook as like a community where we can talk about recipes too.
So cool. So cool. Well, thanks for dropping
Thank
all
you.
that. I'll put all of that into the show notes so the listeners can find all the links there. And for
Awesome.
everyone else listening to the Low Carb Consultant podcast, we'll catch you guys on the next one. Thanks.